Ladies and gentlemen, I was flippant earlier when I allowed Ms. Moore to, Mother Moore, to have her demonstration, but the rules of the council chamber are correct. There are no demonstrations allowed in the council chamber. And I know that everyone has a lot of emotion and excitement and a lot of passion about their positions. But if we're to conduct the business and get to all the issues that you would have us to address, we would appreciate if we would not have the pleasant distraction of applause during the conversation. Thank you.
Reverend Beckham, and just responding to your question, Katrina Taylor Parks, Deputy Chief of Staff, the mayor's comments were that once the plan was finalized and adopted by the city council, then we would look into or create an agreement to follow the plan. So we have not gotten to that point yet.
All right, next.
Is there a plan to get to that part, to get to an agreement? Is there a process that we're going to follow that says after it's adopted by the council, then we take the next step towards an agreement? Is that on the table? Is there a plan that's taking us that way, or?
There's been, we are trying to get to that point. I just can't say, I don't know the brain capacity because we can't get past this. So once we get to that point, but it has been discussed and we are trying to get there so that we can discuss the options of agreements to follow the plans. And as we know that the framework represents the categories that applications will be made under. And so as applications are made and approved, those two, TOO, become agreements because that is when it is binding. So to answer your question, yes, there has been discussion. Do we have a codified schedule? No, we do not as of today. But that is definitely something that we can be working on and have some tangible information and evidence for you in the near future.
Okay, we're going down the road, but is there one between Ivory and the Reverend with a question? If not, Mr. Young.
No, hold on, you're going down the road?
Reverend John, okay. I didn't see your hand.
First thing that we want to make sure that we are representing the people, and the first thing that we heard out of their mouths over a year ago when we knew that this was coming down the pipeline was some type of tax abatement for our residents that are seniors and low income. And we need to address that. We've been talking about it, but it has not been addressed. I know that there is no free money, but there's got to be a way that we can protect the residents that are there now and will own their homes throughout the time that they're there, that their taxes are abated. That's number one question. Number two question is, I heard from the public comment about the storm water runoff. In 2002, we all remember the storm where we had when they built the new addition to the World Congress Center, and we lost some residents there in Tyler Rock Street. With this new development coming, I got to pull brakes now and ask about the storm water runoff, because if it's being built elevated, what's going to happen with us there in Vine City? And then the third question was, we had on the historic preservation, one of the residents said we need to make sure we add to that national registry. So question number one, tax abatement.
Under section 3.08, it is the strategy for the current homeowners tax abatement strategy. So we heard the committee when they addressed that last week, and that was included in the plan. And secondly, the actual action is a legislative action that has to be taken by the state. And so that is further conversation. There is the homestead exemption that exists today that I know when Mayor Reed was a state senator, he increased it, I think, from 15 to 30,000. So, but that is something that has to be taken via state action. But it's in the plan right now. So, right.
Okay.
We didn't do the stormwater.
Oh.
Stormwater is in there too, under, right, 3.09A.
Scott Chapman, Castleberry Hill. And I don't know if it's a comment or a question, but it's my understanding, and I want to make sure that everybody at the table understands it the same way, that the document in front of us today is a large bucket, and that funds that are applied for to Invest Atlanta will have to live through the merits or the requirements of Invest Atlanta's process. There are laws that they have to run by, and their charter, and that the funds from the Blank Foundation are going to be according to their giving guidelines. So is the question really about any more individual projects, or do we have the buckets all there? And I'm really concerned that I don't think that everybody in the room understands that. And I want to make sure that everybody does, because I think for several weeks we spun our wheels that the buckets are here, but the individual projects have to live on their own merit.
That's right.
If I want to open up a restaurant that serves grass, that's not going to have a whole lot of merit. But if I want to open up something different that's going to bring some merit, that makes a lot more sense. So it really comes down to having the merit for the application and how much we do our homework as a community, not necessarily is it listed as a project. Is that correct or incorrect?
Yes. I think one of the things that I'll say is that as we receive for the Invest Atlanta for the tax allocation district funding, which is primarily for capital projects, as we receive those applications, we will have criteria, evaluative criteria that we look at. And one of those criteria will be, where was this in terms of priority from the community? Because we did the Survey Monkey, and so we heard back from the community in terms of those items under each category that were the most important. So does it fit within the categories, and where in terms of priority is it? That's number one. You know, what type of funding is going to be requested, how much funding, and is it consistent with what the community wants? And I think the Blank Foundation is going to be using a very similar process as they evaluate projects that come to them. They will be looking at the survey results, how the community prioritized what was important, as well as what's important to them based on the conversation that the Blank Foundation had with us when they came. So we know the areas that they're focused on. So the question will be, does the application speak to that? Does the application speak to what the community responded back? And that will carry a lot of weight in terms of project funding, along with financial feasibility and ability to actually implement.
Thank you. I'm done. Oh, there was one more thing. In the historic preservation bucket, there's a question about whether or not we can do some National Historic Register of Historic Places. We'll wait for well, thank you, Charlotte. I'll yield that to Charlotte.
Okay, so here's a broken record. One of the things that we talked about last week in our presentation were quality of life issues surrounding the new stadium project, and we were instructed after the presentation and after the meeting last week to look over all of our documents and make sure that all the buckets were properly represented in this document. And I still feel that that is not properly represented in this document, as far as, because it is not a fundable project, that it's not being properly addressed in this process.
So, Ms. Bear, I'm trying to make sure that I'm clear. When you say quality of life, what specifically, what types of projects would that be?
That's what I'm saying, it's not a project.
But it's a concept.
That's correct. Okay.
Okay, a concept, and we did have a conversation earlier today, and so, Suzanne, part of the things are being addressed, but just for clarity for the committee, let's talk about it. When you mentioned quality of life, you all had a PowerPoint that went with that, and we broke it down in 3 categories, before construction, during construction, and post-construction, in our conversation, the informal conversation that we had. And so the quality of life issues relative to those time periods associated with the actual project. And so before construction, I think the concern was about ongoing meetings for the community with the construction team, what's going on, what is, what's happening, at some, time period. I think we said 30 to every 45 days, that we would provide to the community a forum to sit down with the construction team and the city of Atlanta regarding pre-construction and the impact for the community, similar to an example would be the detour plan or something of that nature. During construction, we talked about the city providing a project manager or a program manager that would deal with ongoing and daily issues that a community may face. That would be a quality of life issue, so that you wouldn't be going directly to the construction site just trying to find anybody. You want to have a point person that will be able to respond to those issues that are affecting you immediately. And then 3, we talked about the post-construction, which would include monitoring and planning of those activities that are happening within the new stadium project. And what we said to that is the city would facilitate those meetings and follow through, because at that point the city would not have purview over the planning. That would be a Georgia World Congress Center a role that they would have to play. Those 3 items, I think that we could consider them broadly placed in here, but I also think that we should consider asking the council to amend the legislation to put those 3 points in, as we discussed, as it relates to quality of life issues. So they're not specific, to your point, and so everyone else would know, they're not projects. This is how this stadium will impact the community in these particular areas. Right?
Correct.
Okay. So the suggestion would be that the legislation that's there, this language would be agreed upon, to ask the determining body, which is the city council, to amend the legislation to include that. It would not happen at this level.
Okay, so how do we make that happen?
We come up with the language, and at the meeting, the community development meeting where the legislation will go, we ask them to amend it, or we provide a substitute that includes any new language that would be determined or submitted by this committee for the council to look at.
And when does that meeting take place?
Tuesday.
Great, thank you.
Thank you. One of the things I would like to note is that it's very enlightening to see the concepts that were presented by the Department of Planning and Community Development to be incorporated, and they run the gamut from some of the catalytic projects in terms of the improved transportation connectivity and the high-density mixed use along Northside Drive, as well as the TOD concepts, all the way down to the green space and urban agriculture. So we have looked at this and felt that those things that we did present, some as low-hanging fruit, some more as long-term concepts, are incorporated. I would like to also speak more to the section 3.13 concerning historic preservation, and did make note of the comments that you made, Reverend Johnson. And I do think that they would be incorporated under A, identify landmarks, Because one of the things that I said early on that is captured is promote and preserve. While we talk about National Register, that's more of recognition, and local designation is more of protection. So I think that if we keep it as identifying landmarks, we have the opportunity to decide which way we want to go. Some things you don't want, you want to actually recognize them as historic facilities. You may not want to put the local designation on it because it becomes more restrictive at that point. So it does give us the opportunity to be broad in the sense, because we could do a number of things out of that. So I really think from my perspective, and actually from managing the historic preservation task that is within my office, that this would capture it, and then we could talk about a whole number of ways to preserve, promote, and promote tourism as well in all of the neighborhoods.
Mr. Bond?
It's your turn.
Thank you. Ms. Salvery, thank you for the list that you provided. There are some things that have been discussed up here that I'm going to kind of reiterate that I think really ought to be incorporated in our final document. One of which is an outline of our schedule that denotes the major milestones of our process, so that and every time the questions are being asked, they're articulated by this body and communicated, but I think it needs to be a formal part of the document, start and finish. This is where we are in our process. The next phase is part B, part C is X, part D is, so that folks can know at what point we reach the agreements that we've been talking about. We keep circling back around, where are the agreements? Well, the agreements are forthcoming, and they're communicated by this body, but then people still ask because they need to physically see where that is in the overall process. There's some references in here about how we will prioritize the activities. I wonder, with the limited amount of funding that's available, do we need to establish degrees of priority with regard to how much how much of a priority each of these individual projects and concepts are in the plan relative to the amount of funding that might be available for each of the individual categories? There are, and as difficult as it is to do that with the limited funds that are available from the various funding sources. We've listed the funding sources, but I think in order of prioritization, there are some things that absolutely probably should happen very quickly, and then some other things that are less of a priority. So the prioritization, I think, might be something we would consider. I think some who have not been a part of the tax allocation district process and competitive process probably are not familiar with Invest Atlanta's evaluation and due diligence when it comes to the evaluation of proposals. But I think there are some things that are already set through Invest Atlanta with regard to how we evaluate various proposals that I think ought to be simply extracted from your operational manuals and made a part of the document, so that folks who eventually, when we do get to the point of soliciting proposals and RFPs, folks can know, well, this is the criteria, these are the processes, this is what's expected, and Invest Atlanta is charged to track, to evaluate, to determine. At least that's historically been your role in the past, and I don't see that would be any different now, but I think documenting that would probably be a complement to what we do now, or what we have now.
So, Councilmember, thank you for that comment, and I do direct your attention to the exhibit that is, I believe it's exhibit E. which is the Community Improvement Fund fact sheet, which talks about the 15 million in tax allocation district funding. It talks about the types of projects that we would be looking for. It also has the evaluative criteria down at the bottom for that. And then on the back of the page, it talks about the process for getting from application all the way to funding. So we've included that as an exhibit. We talk about it in the plan at the very beginning under section 2.06. I'm sorry, not 2.07. So it's 2.07 and it's also exhibit E.
Thank you, and I'm not saying it doesn't exist, but I think it needs to be more transparent and easier to find as a part of the working plan. So maybe there's a more transparent, more visible way to place that so that folks can more readily, I guess, access that. I'm fine with the content, but there is a point that I'd like for us to consider. There are a lot of folks in here that come from a lot of different jurisdictions. There's certainly some Vine City and English Avenue and Castleberry Hill residents in the room, but there are a lot of folks who come from all over the place and desire to compete and be an active, engaged part of this process. I would wonder if there ought not be specifically prescribed some benefit for folks who are proposing projects, whoever they are, whatever the projects, that there would be some bonuses provided for those who would either engage in contractual relationships or partner with folks who are actually from the community, who are actually providing services. And that maybe that, and I'm not saying here, but as we perfect the procurement aspects of what we have to do, I think we ought to consider that, because if we're not empowering, if we're not engaging the existing stakeholders in the community to be a part of the solution, then I think we've missed a step. And the other part of that is there are some folks who wish we would just engage in relationships right now. Just go ahead and just accept your project as is. And I think it's really important for us to remember that as we speak for thousands of people who are not in this room, they want us to do better than we've done in the past. They want us to make sure that the dollars that have been appropriated actually reach them. So, to that end, the city's history, and most other governments, we have a competitive process where people compete for resources, which means we may have multiple applicants trying to do the same thing. But there could be one that is better equipped and capable than others. So certainly, those of us who have been at this table for decades certainly have a sense of entitlement to these resources. But I personally don't feel entitled to anybody but to all of us and the people that we hope to benefit from this process. So what it means is put your game face on, and all the things that we talk about building capacity, we have to go above and beyond in building teams, building relationships, and processes that get the resources to the people who we're intending to help. So, the idea that, well, I'm who I am and I'm status in this community, I'm the spokesperson, I'm making demands. Well, the demands should come with the excellence of the proposals that should follow in responding to the plan. Because we can't sit here 10 years from now and talk about what we could have and should have. And we need to measure the outcome of these expenditures. I'm going to try to move very quickly with a couple more comments, Mr. Chair. I wrote notes based on what a lot of comments that were made, and I saw a lot of what was asked for that was reflected in the concept and the plan. I think people still misinterpret that we're not trying to move toward an agreement. My understanding, Mr. Chair, is that the agreement, and I think it was stated previously, the agreement is simply a function of the individual respondents to the request for proposals. Those successful respondents will enter into agreement, because right now, I don't know if we were to enter into an agreement today, who that agreement would be with. And I would venture to say we have a great deal of difficulty determining who that is. But I think with each of these projects, we have a responsibility as you compete. And if you're successfully awarded the project, we enter into agreement with those individuals that successfully matriculate through this process. All right. Lastly, that's it. I mean, the statements that, there's a lot of unanswered questions. Well, there were just a few people talking about this several months ago. This room was not a part of that process. Most of you weren't a part of that process. And I think everybody up here at this table desires a bit of transparency. I think cameras and mics and meeting every 2 weeks and us talking about this suggests that there's a bit of transparency here. And that we're not trying to bait and switch or hide anything. If there's something that we're not addressing that's not in this plan, I think the time to speak up is now. The time to speak up is now, but my point is are there unknowns? Are there things that we've not addressed? Are there things that should be covered? Well, I'm looking for the list of what that is. I've heard it mentioned a couple times tonight, but I'm still looking for the list of what that is. If it's not included in here, we need to know what that is. What's not in this document? Thank you.
All right, we've been joined by the distinguished president of the Atlanta City Council, the Honorable Caesar C. Mitchell. Member of the committee.
Who's next?
Caesar, you don't have anything?
Not right now, I will.
Oh, okay. Let me just tell you, it's a lot to say, and a lot's been said. But what I want to say is that I sit at this table as a representative of the community. And I'm a mother, and I'm a sister, and I'm a friend to many in my neighborhood. And I can't just take this lightly. And I would like to say that maybe everything is okay and we should just try to work from where we're at. But I can't do that because that's not the will of the people. And so my charge is to represent the community, and that's exactly what I'm going to do. Ernestine, earlier I sent an email to you about adding the Preserve of Historic Sites to the document. Did you receive that? It was late this afternoon, so I'm not sure if you got it. And also section 3.15. I can give you that, and but that's not what I'm really charged to do this evening as a community benefits community member. Whereas the affected neighborhoods have met in good faith to draft a community benefits plan agreement with the City of Atlanta, and the results of that effort has created a document that does not yet meet the original intent of the legislation and does not yet fulfill the principles of a community benefits plan agreement, we now move for a deferral under the following conditions. And so I'd like to make a motion that we defer any kind of voting action on this document this evening. Can I get a second on that motion?
Yvonne, before you before I acknowledge your motion, I'm going to allow everybody else to ask their questions about, any questions they have about the document
Yes.
before we entertain taking any action, because there's still others down the way that have questions.
Oh, couldn't they make their questions or comments at the question of the motion?
Well, as the chair, I'm not going to
okay.
acknowledge your motion until after they've had a chance to ask their question, because
Okay, are you saying you will acknowledge the motion, though?
I acknowledge that they would have an opportunity to ask questions first
Okay.
before we would entertain any action items.
Okay, but you will acknowledge the motion.
Once the questions are completed.
All right, great.
Are you finished with your question?
Well, yeah, it's not a lot of questions because I think that at this point that the document is not ready and that the information that I have forwarded today, I would like to have it inserted into the plan that we have, that we are working on, the working plan. And I have some copies of it, but I wonder if you could just pass this to Ernestine because I also have emailed her earlier.
Okay. Well, let's finish up the questions.
Yeah. I have,
Okay.
What happened to my?
do you want to skip me? Oh.
No, were you next? Go ahead.
Yeah,
No,
yeah, he
go
was
ahead.
next.
I'm deferring.
No, I'll wait.
Okay.
You go ahead.
All right. So, a few things about the framework that was provided. When looking at the document, to me, it should be more strategic in terms of, for example, if you just have a category and you have sidewalks listed, that doesn't do anything. So one school of thought is that you provide the document to have SMART goals so that is specific, measurable, and what's listed is achievable, reasonable, and you have a time frame. Because that way, at the end of the day, you can look at the outcome. It's more focused. But what's here is a very broad category. And so I think there's still more work to be done. In addition to that, another example is it does not really address, for example, the business corridor along MLK. For example, the site at which the stadium is going to sit, it was said that the 50-yard line would be where Mount Vernon now sits. So the reality on the ground is that the stadium is going to sit on top of ML King. And the other piece is that we worked hard to make sure that the flow of connecting the neighborhoods to downtown is a goal of the neighborhoods so that we're connected to the prosperity. And I want to hear more about how the neighborhoods and specifically the MLK business corridor is going to connect. And earlier, the folks at Georgia Tech, Mike Dobbins, mentioned the transportation plan. I think we need to, the benefits agreement should address that in a specific way. Otherwise, it gets lost in the broadness of the document. I think that at this point is the point in which the community has the most leverage to make that happen. And so I'm going to pause and hear back from the rest of the committee members. And I'm going to defer to the councilwoman.
No. Well, first of all, I just wanted, first thing I wanted to do was to compliment all the people who have worked on this document, especially the neighborhood organizations. I do want to emphasize, and kind of piggybacking on what Councilmember Young said, is, you know, although we think this $15 million is a lot of money, it really isn't. And so what you may still want to do is look at some organizations that have capacity that will allow you to kind of do a jump start so that you can really start getting ahead because the stadium work is going to start, when is that? That's going to start April of next year. So I just wanted to just kind of reemphasize to some of you that there may be an opportunity now, and Ms. Gary and I were talking, I think it was on yesterday, just talking about the Atlanta Urban League. They have a program for 18 to 24-year-olds where they just got a grant. It's for young people who are ex-offenders, who need a GED, and so that may be an opportunity where some of you who, there's something in here that talks about, hiring 100 youth. So that may be an opportunity for you to hit the ground running with that, with an infusion of something that they have. And they also expunge a young person's record. So that's an opportunity maybe to hook in with what they have. They still have more slots that are available for young persons to take advantage of. So I just wanted to mention that. And then, of course, there are other opportunities, $4 through the City of Atlanta, and that's through the Capital Improvement Project. So just wanted to mention that as well. But I'm hoping that we can move on from here because we've got a lot of work to do in a short period of time to do it in.
Anybody else?
Yeah. So I congratulate the committee on doing a good job with a brainstorming exercise, but this is the first time we've seen this document that hasn't had the word draft or framework on it. And I know as an architect, if I was requested by a client to come up with a plan for a house, and I came up back with a list that said roof, walls, doors, windows, that's not a plan. And even if I got the best doors and windows and roof, that wouldn't mean I had a house, which is what the client was asking for. So I think we've got a lot of work left to do, and this document that we've got before us is a great stepping stone to get there, but it's not the plan that the committee has been charged with creating. And this document's not just about applications for a particular project, for project concepts. Per the original legislation, we're dealing with public safety, which we have not yet had any sort of presentation or report from the police department on. There are other issues that are discussed that we have not dealt with at all. Likewise, the only information we've received from the Falcons, from the Royal Congress Center, has been in the public media. There's been no presentation to this committee, which is difficult to come up with a plan for the $200 million that we're giving to the stadium project when we're acting in the dark, not having seen officially what they're proposing. And as was mentioned before, if some of the items that we have called out are asking for in our plan, at least in our framework, are regarding connectivity, enhanced transportation, historic recognition and preservation, and what we're getting from the Falcons, from the Royal Congress Center, is the removal of a street, the addition of parking, and the destruction of a historic building. I think we have issues with the plan working out in a reality that's going to be beneficial to the neighborhood, to the city at large.
Okay, is that the end of the questions down on that end?
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry.
First of all, I did compare. Do you hear me?
Yes.
All right, I did compare the community benefit plan with what was submitted from the Vine City Civic Association as well as the Merchants Association. And through much work, we got all of the items in the plan. And I want to thank the staff for that, and that was a process. There was one item that I didn't see, and and I need some explanation for that. And that was protection of historic landmark zoning. Was there, She did? Did I miss it? I'm sorry. Oh, okay. Can you recap it for me? That's fine. But it hasn't been spoken to?
She's looking at it now.
Okay.
Makeda, it doesn't specifically say protection of, I think the comment that was referenced in the PowerPoint presentation was to respect the landmark zoning. And so what's here is to evaluate the current zoning and permitted uses and then assess impact and rezoning. And one of the things that we have offered from the Department of Planning and Community Development is to actually evaluate that current landmark zoning. And our intent was to strengthen that as well as to see in our evaluation to be sure that we strengthen it and evaluate how we can ensure that it does stand from all of the negotiations that we went through about 6 years ago, and actually how we could possibly expand it. So it's not specific, but its intent is there to incorporate not only Castleberry Hill, but there are some zoning initiatives that we want to undertake in English Avenue and Vine City as well.
All right, thank you.
Question?
Was that the last on the end? Okay,
Ms.
Mr.
Jackson?
Young.
I have a question to Ms. Jackson.
Go ahead.
Oh, thank you. Ms. Jackson, would it be to our advantage just as a policy statement that as far as the landmark district for Castleberry, as far as the redevelopment plans that the communities are already on record of having endorsed both in English Avenue and Vine City, that there would be strict that all projects would be consistent with those plans. To me, it's, as a statement, we've not endorsed the ABD plan, we've not endorsed any of the concepts that have been developed. The only thing that we have that protects the integrity of what will be implemented are the redevelopment plans that have already been supported and endorsed, the landmark district that has already been supported and endorsed by the impacted community that already exists, that's been codified by the council. So that any proposal as far as capital improvement or built environment or future land use would be in strict conformance to what has already been approved in those plans. Would that, I mean, should that be an overriding policy that we should follow in this process?
Councilmember Young, I think that that's a policy that is followed by the planning department as a whole. As you know, we have a comprehensive development plan, and the Castleberry Hill plan and all of the plans that we've done for English Avenue are incorporated in that overarching policy document, the comprehensive development plan. So we do evaluate development proposals against those plans which have been adopted by council, which therein becomes the policy.
So I mean, are we saying that that is already the policy?
That is the policy. That is the operating policy of the department.
Well, I think it just probably needs to be reinforced in this plan itself that everything that's presented ought to be in strict conformance to what's already been adopted by the impacted neighborhood and codified by the city council already.
That's a statement that can be made.
Thank you.
All right, we exhausted questions from the committee. Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I appreciate the opportunity to ask a few questions and get some clarity. First thing I'd like to do is certainly commend the members of this committee, the elected official members, the staff members, and certainly the members of the community who've taken the time to be a part of this process to this point. And certainly I can imagine that the folks who are here in the public who've been here for every meeting have spent a lot of time being here because they care about this issue. I just have a few questions about the document. I want to make sure I'm clear about what this document is. It says plan. If someone, I'm not sure who the person is who would help me with this, I'm looking at Article 2, Section 2.01, and it says area residents. And it says residents of Vine City, English Avenue, Castleberry Hill, and surrounding areas. Now, does that also, I guess, are we defining surrounding areas as the Marietta Corridor and Atlanta downtown neighbors? Can someone give me an answer on that?
So we were broad there because there are some project concepts here that may extend beyond the actual boundaries of the three communities, particularly, some of the public infrastructure projects. Obviously, in order to receive funding through the Westside TAD, it has to be in the neighborhoods of Vine City, English Avenue, and Castleberry Hill to benefit from the $15 million. And with the Blank Foundation $15 million, their focus is English Avenue, Vine City, and Castleberry Hill, but they have made investments in and around the communities, and so I think we wanted to make sure that this was broad enough that it was not just exclusive for this footprint.
Okay, now I know looking at section 2.03, there were 5 neighborhoods that were contemplated. I want to make sure I'm not wrong. In section 2.03, you had Atlanta Downtown Neighborhood Association, Marietta Street Artery Neighborhood Association, Vine City, English Avenue, and Castleberry Hill. But I'm confused about why I don't see Atlanta Downtown Neighborhood Association and Marietta Street Artery Neighborhood Association included in the definition of area residence. I mean, I just want to make sure I'm clear. I don't know if I'm missing some legalese here.
Well, it says surrounding areas. You mean as opposed to specifically mentioning those other two?
Yeah, I mean, we've got members of this committee who represent those neighborhoods, and we've spent a lot of time working on this on this community benefits, I guess, plan, and they're not even defined in a document that they've worked on. I mean, specifically defined. I just want to be clear on that. I don't understand why they are not, and maybe the residents or the representatives from those particular communities can explain. Maybe it's been explained to them.
Councilman, that came directly from legislation, and if you read, it says it's not limited to those groups. So when we added other people, it can, I mean, because initially there were some people that weren't added, so it wasn't limited to those groups, but that's what's in the legislation. So that was pulled directly from there.
So this document is being asked to go to the city council for me and other members of the council to deliberate.
It came from
Okay,
us.
so what are we getting ready to send? What am I looking at? I've got a folder here that says Community Benefits Plan. And so this is the plan that the council created, or is this the plan that this committee created?
That was the plan that was created here.
Okay, so now, I want to be really
But
clear.
the definition came from the council.
Okay, but I want to be clear about what this body is going to send, this committee is going to send to the council to vote on. And I'm concerned if we've got in section 2.101, a listing of 3 neighborhoods, and we have 5 neighborhoods that are in the amendment, and 5 neighborhoods that are represented here. And we're getting ready to send this document to the council, excluding 2 stakeholders, to this committee. I just want to make sure, maybe this is just a typographical error.
No, this is information that was pulled from the original legislation that created the committee. And so this is the plan, as you stated, President Mitchell. But within the plan, in the early, 2.0, that language was pulled directly from the legislation that council created, that created the community benefits plan. So those neighborhoods, to Justin's point, and it may be, I don't know, Roz, or someone can elaborate, I don't know if the Marietta corridor and the Atlanta downtown, are they within the Westside TAD? They're not, and that may be the downtown, yes. But this is how council wrote the amendment to create the community benefits.
But this body is producing a plan, or whatever we want to call it. We're producing a community benefits document to send back to the council that will actually speak to specific initiatives in these communities of stakeholders. And to have a plan before us that doesn't even list or define in 2 of the stakeholder neighborhoods who've been here with representatives for the entire time is perplexing to me. And the explanation that this is what came from the council doesn't really make sense to me, because it's not about what came from the council here, it's about what this body sends back to the council to vote on. Well, and in that case, I mean, a couple of council members who are here will vote twice on it. So, so I just want to understand, the disconnect. I mean, I understand what you're saying about the legislation, you know, that the council sent here, but the council sent legislation here to direct this committee to do some work. So I just want to be clear, are we including or not including specifically in the definition of area residents as a work product of this committee two stakeholder neighborhoods, Atlanta Downtown Neighborhood Association, and I'm sorry,
I'll address the concern of Mr. President.
Thank you.
I do want to remind everyone, we were supposed to adjourn at 6:45, it is now 7:40. If there is an omission, I'm glad you pointed it out, because neither any member of this committee, including those two neighborhood representatives, noticed it. But it will certainly be remedied at the committee level.
You mean at this committee level?
No, it'll be remedied at the Community Development Committee level. This committee does not have the ability to amend legislation that's before the City Council. So the paper would have to be amended at the Council Committee.
So but my concern is, thank you, Mr. Chair. My concern is that this committee is charged with sending a document to the council. And so if the document that's, if I'm hearing you all correctly, the document that's being sent to the council is already pre-programmed by the council before coming here, then what's the use and the value? What's the use and the value of the work of this committee? And particularly with such a blatant omission as the Atlanta Downtown Neighborhood Association and the Marietta Street Neighborhood Association. I mean,
So 2.03 has it in there, Councilmember Bond. 2.03 names every floor, everybody here. So I don't know.
President hasn't finished this.
So I'm just asking a question. We're about to send a work product, and I'm not trying to be funny, and I don't know if this is being taken as a joke, but I'm not trying to be funny. I know what 2.03 said. I just stated it 2 minutes ago. My point is, you got a document here that's supposed to have some consistency and or legal implication to it, because it's going from this body back to the council to consider. And in the definition of area residents, you don't even include the stakeholders who are.
Wait. Ms. Taylor, you're out. Ms. Taylor Parks, you are out of order. Wait, Mr. President. I'm presiding, chairing the meeting.
Yes, sir.
And I will address your concern, because I think that you are embarrassing the Marietta Corridor and Downtown Neighborhood Representative for dropping the ball on making sure that they were represented. I will assure you, sir, that the Office of Legislation, two of which are seated at this table, will correct that typographical error and make sure that all parties are listed so that we can continue the business.
Okay, let me keep going, and I'll leave it there. I hope I don't have to explain my point again. I think it's very clear. Now, just help me, and maybe I'm a little slow, so let's do this. I'm looking at section, for example, 3.03. It's got a number of things listed here: comprehensive education programs, GED programs, education fund, technical school, internship, apprenticeship program, ex-offender reentry program. How much money from the $15 million from both sources, the $30 million, how much specifically is being allocated to each of these funds? Do we know?
No.
Okay, we don't know?
President Mitchell, no. We have an application process. So no, we have not divvied up the 15 million into any of the categories that are here. We did hear back from the community in terms of their priorities under each category. That will be taken into consideration when the applications come to Invest Atlanta. So this plan is not the appropriate place to actually have a division of funds, because that is actually managed through the Invest Atlanta TAD Committee, the Westside TAD Advisory Board, and the Invest Atlanta Board, who will decide how the money actually gets spent for various projects.
Okay, gotcha. I think I understand. So in the listing of A, B, C, D, and A, B, C, D, E, and A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, J, are these listings, am I supposed to imply from the listing of A towards a lower number that the priorities, these listed are priorities or prioritized, or there's really no order in the listing?
So
It doesn't look like it's alphabetical, or is it alphabetical?
No, it's not alphabetical, so the
Okay.
priority here is consistent with the results of the survey that came back.
Okay, so for example, in section 3.05, we've got mental behavioral health program, health clinic, comprehensive drug alcohol treatment program, food pantry, and birthing center. So the priority under this section 3.05 is, I'm assuming, item A, mental behavioral health program?
That is correct.
Okay.
That's the priority that was established from the Survey Monkey.
Okay,
Now,
so-
the only time that there will be a difference in priority, because there were several concepts that were added as a result of feedback from the committee in the last couple of meetings. And so they may not be in the exact priority because they weren't part of the Survey Monkey.
Oh,
But that information came to us after the Survey Monkey was done and we started to draft the plan.
oh,
So for this particular category, 3.05, nothing changed in that category. So the priority there is consistent with the survey that is an exhibit, that's Exhibit K in your notebook.
okay. All right, okay. Okay, all right, I think I got you. With respect to the listing in some of these sections where I see strategies, I'm assuming that's going to require, for example, in section 3.08, we've got 3.08B is vacant housing strategy, section G is non-displacement strategy, you go down to 3.09B, you've got construction mitigation strategy, you got section E, environmental protection division study. So is it my assumption that these will be self-performed by the city, or will we be getting consultants that we will pay to provide these strategies as a part of these? I'm just using those as examples.
It could be one or the other or combination, depending on the need.
Okay, all right, so some of that would be basically not necessarily provided directly to the community, but provided for the community.
That's correct.
Okay, all right. Okay, I'll stop there because I know time is running late, but I may have more questions. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
All right.
Can I get back to the motion?
Yes, fine.
With due respect to everything that's been said, I would like to make a motion that we defer any further action on tonight of this document.
Mr. Chair.
You've already made the motion and
Okay.
seconded it already.
Well, then let's have a vote.
I mean, the chair hasn't handled that.
I know.
Yes, and the chair will act. We've got hands.
Because the document has not met, the reason why that I'm making this motion, because the document has not met the specific intent of the original legislation which was outlined. And the stakeholders that we developed the community benefits plan with a focus on and not limited to environmental impact of the NSP, traffic and congestion issues, impact on the neighborhoods surrounding NSP, and potential gentrification issues impacting the neighborhoods surrounding the NSP, and economic development. Therefore, until the following elements are incorporated into the document, currently the plan, the neighborhoods could not move forward in support of this proposed plan. The non-negotiable elements included, but are not limited to, there are 6 items that I have, and one is funds allocated for the use of the representatives from the affected neighborhoods to rely upon as a resource to convert the existing general plan into an implementation strategy with timelines and benchmarks for anticipated outcomes. 2, specific disclosure by the city and state to demonstrate the connectivity to each of the affected neighborhoods, including road entry and exits, position of the stadium, how it's going to be situated, related to the affected neighborhoods, and integration of the new road formerly known as Martin Luther King Jr. Drive. And 3, specific measurement criteria for the elements of the recommended concept project, similar to the outcome measurement framework used by the United Way or HUD to evaluate and track outcomes required by funding allocations. 4, specific language binding the City of Atlanta to deliver the recommended concept projects. 5, specific integration of elements called upon in the original legislation to include certain quality of life matters, including but not limited to mitigation of the traffic and congestion issues, the impact on the neighborhoods surrounding the NSP. And 6, specific legislation enacted by City Council ensuring the continuity of the original Community Bits Agreement Committee to survive through the build-out period of the stadium project and provide oversight to the requested evaluation and tracking methodologies. We are therefore repeating this in the form of the motion that we made.